So in this video, I'm going to be ranking all 36 sultans of the Ottoman Empire. Right. So what inspired this was that I had a kebab, I had an idea, so I'm just going to rank these. Okay, we're going to start with number one. Right. Abdul Majid. So Abdul Majid, I would say, so I mean, certainly one of the better rulers, especially during the late period. I would say, he sort of started the like Tanzimat, I think it is the Tanzimat reforms, which basically just sort of led to modernization, focused on the sort of national Ottoman identity. I'd say maybe not S tier, but I think I'll put him in A tier. Again, feel free to disagree and put what you think in the comments, but I personally think he goes in A tier. Right. And then so the next one is Abdulaziz. So Abdulaziz again, sort of during the later period, uh, probably probably one of the weaker sultans because although he'd brought about some westernization, lots of it too little too late, and he ushered his rule at the end was bad. It ushered in um like it ushered in the what a Great Eastern Crisis, sort of like during his rule, the Ottoman Empire sort of like got that kind of label of uh it being the sort of sick man of Europe. So Abdulaziz has got to go in B tier, I gotta say, you know. Um, right. Abdul Hamid number one. Abdul Hamid the first was, in my opinion, a good sultan. Although he did, I mean, from a personal sort of from a sultan perspective, he wasn't that good because they ceded land, like Ottoman lands that had been won and by previous sultans, and so that would normally put him lower. But I think looking at sort of some of the personal information about him. I would say that, it says he was religiously devout, he was a very kind ruler, and so I personally I think that because of that, because of he was good domestically, wasn't that good with the foreign, but he was good domestically. I think I'll move him to I mean a low B or high C. I'll put him in all right tier. I think he was all right. It wasn't like certainly wasn't that bad. Right, anyways, moving on. Abdul Hamid II, on the other hand, was not that good because during Abdul Hamid's rule, the Ottoman Empire sort of started going down, 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 down. And basically, he was the last sort of sultan to actually have the powers of a sultan. After that, they just sort of became constitutional figurehead monarchs, like the Queen of England. Oh, sorry, the King of England. It's sorry, I'm still adjusting. So yeah, Abdulhamid II. I think, mm, I think I have to put him in. I have to put him in D tier. Right. Ahmed the First. So Ahmed the First was so he was sort of so his whole thing, his like he what he's famous for is basically he ended sort of that thing of like royal fratricide of like ascending to the throne and killing all your brothers. Because basically for him, everyone, all the sultans, they got to they ascended to the throne and because they wanted to get rid of all the competition, they killed everyone. And so, you know, so so yeah, so his ending of sort of that is pretty good. But in that same sense, it also the sort of weakened the Sultanate because there was like the empire because you're not getting like the best, and it's also these guys are getting soft. No, I don't know, but um, I would say Ahmed the First. I think probably I'll put him in B tier for in good tier because I think it's a good thing not to kill all your brothers. Right. Ahmed the Second, on the other hand. So Ahmed the Second was sort of one of those like sort of smaller, well, not smaller, but like basically his whole thing was like he spent like almost his entire life in royal detention. So he spent it in this like I think it's called the Cafes, where it's basically it's like a holding place for all like the other heirs. This is after Ahmed the First, obviously. So royal fratricides, not that much of a thing now. So they just keep him in a house, but you still can't let them out. And so Ahmed the Second basically is one of those, and he, what he does is he tries to focus on the war with the Habsburgs, with the Holy Roman Empire, although nothing really comes out of it. His domestic policies are all right, and he also pursues sort of the same policies of the people of like of what's it like his previous predecessors who had focused on sort of reform, focusing on stability, um, yeah, focused on stability uh, of like stabilizing the Ottoman Empire. So I think Ahmed the Second. I think I'll put him in right tier. I just think there's not that much to say about him in general. Right, Ahmed the Third. So moving on to Ahmed the Third. Right, I need to find my notes on Ahmed the Third. So Ahmed the Third, on the other hand, is sort of marks the sort of beginning of. He is a good ruler, but his sort of rule marks this beginning of like sort of the stagnation of the empire. So what he does is he tries to restrict the power of the Janissaries, and uh, he what he does is he has a successful campaign against Russia, and he also gets this title of like lawgiver because he brings order to sort of land ownership, and so he's a good reformer, and so I think Ahmed the Third, in comparison to the first and the second, I would probably put Ahmed the Third. I don't know if you can make rates here. I think I'll put him in high good tier. I think I might come to regret this, but I'll put him in high good tier for now. Right. Now, Bayezid the First. So, Bayezid the First, he was a good ruler, as in he conquered land. So, obviously one of the first sultans from the beginning. Rapidly expanded the empire. He's known as the Thunderbolt. And what he did is he basically vanquished all the other Beyliks, which had been like fighting. And like, so because at the start, the start was marked by Usman, who like sort of made his Beylik the most powerful, and so that's how he kind of wrested power. But at the same time, it was not the like total power in the area. There's still other Beyliks, and so what Bayezid sort of focused on was sort of getting rid of all these other Beyliks and consolidating power into the hands of the Ottoman Empire. And so, he conquered places, he focused on campaigns in Rumelia, conquering Bulgaria and northern Greece, so focusing on the Balkans. And so, he was a really good sultan, but sort of an aura loss because what happened was he got so there's this like famous thing. There's like this famous episode. If you've seen this play by Christopher Marlowe, Tamburlaine, but basically what happens is Hemer, the conqueror from Central Asia, defeats Bayezid, and he captures him and he puts him in a cage, and he basically sort of, well, not a cage, but he puts him in confinement and he humiliates him essentially, and he like degrades him from being that high and sort of mighty position of being a sultan, and he sort of he brings him down. And so I think Bayezid could have been top tier, although I think the aura loss from getting captured by Timur probably moves him down a bit. So I'm going to put him in high A tier. Although, yeah, again, it's all subject to change. But guess what? Don't question my authority on this. Right. Anyways, the next one, Bayezid the Second. So Bayezid the Second, in comparison, so Bayezid the Second came after Mehmed the Second. who conquered Constantinople. And so what happened is, so Bayezid II sort of didn't really go out, like like what's it? He wasn't as he didn't make that as much gains as sort of Bayezid the First, but he was still quite a great ruler. As in, what he did is he focused sort of on domestic politics. He ushered in, sort of a great period of intellectualism and thinking. He secured, he secured land in Moria, defeated Poles, and he was known as the Just for his, his righteous ruling. And so I think Bayezid the Second, mm, maybe goes in, uh, I would say probably high good tier. Yeah, and right. Ibrahim. So Ibrahim's a funny one. So Ibrahim basically um was like really horny. I think that's the only real way to put it, but what happened was Ibrahim basically was kept in the cafes and originally, and basically he just sort of had fun with his harem and indulged in all the good things, in life, like perfumes, furs, sort of all the luxuries you can think of. I imagine if it was like if Ibrahim lived now, he'd probably have like a bunch of like designer stuff. He'd like have a flash car. I don't know, probably be in like Dubai or something. But yeah, so and his actual role wasn't that good. He basically sort of just delegated his work to other people. He didn't really do any of his stuff himself because he was too focused on living the high life. And so what eventually happened was, uh, him and his mother were both killed by Janissaries. And so Ibrahim goes. I think Abraham's got to go in like bad tier. I don't think he's like outright that horrible. I mean, yeah, but he's gonna go in bad tier somewhere with these other guys. Right. So Mahmud the First, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names, but I am trying my best to make this good. So Mahmud basically he sort of focused on sort of fighting. Um, he was also part of that generation of sultans that left their work to viziers rather than doing sort of focusing on like day-to-day assignments themselves. And so what he sort of did was he fought against Persia, against the Safavids, um, and in Europe the like Austro-Russian Turkish War. And so what happened is, yeah, so his rule was his rule was okay, but it wasn't like there wasn't really much success. There was nothing, it wasn't huge losses. It was just sort of this period of kind of stuff. So I don't know. I'd say Mahmoud, I'll put him in like low or right tier because it's there's nothing really much to say. Like, yeah. And okay, so the next one, Mahmud the Second, on the other hand, was one of the best ones. So Mahmud the Second, he sort of brought in the period of modernization in the 1800s after sort of the Ottoman Empire had been stagnating for a while, and so he sort of reinvigorated the empire, even though he lost a bunch of territories, like such as losing Bessarabia to Russia, Greece, losing Algeria to the French. So there was a loss of possessions, but there was more focus on sort of the like focus on sort of the well-being of the people in the empire and making sort of the empire great and other means other than just like land. And so he was a great reformer. Um, I mean, I think I'll put him in. I think I'll put him in A tier for great. Again, I don't. I think it's difficult to put some of these other guys in S tier because I think you have to really, really be good to be like top tier. You know what I'm saying? It's like LeBron James sort of like type performance. You know what I mean? So, anyways, right. Um, the next one, Mehmed the First. So Mehmed the First basically sort of what his His big thing was that he reunited the empire. So what happened after Bayezid was that well after he died like in captivity from Timur, sort of there was this like sort of like fight for power filled by this like power vacuum by his sons. And so there's this like big civil war, blah blah blah. They all fight, da 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 da. There's like, some like everyone's resting for who's the legitimate ruler. And then Mehmed comes out on top. He reunites the empire, and what he does is he also establishes central authority in Anatolia and sort of conquers, makes gains conquering in like Albania and Cilicia. And so, like great. I mean, one of the better sultans. So I think Mehmed probably goes. I mean, probably just for like maintaining the balance. I would say he probably got to put him in maybe like a low A tier, low A tier. Right. Well, and then we get to Mehmed II, who I think there's not much to say. I mean, he's known as the Conqueror. He conquered, Constantinople. He basically he conquered. I mean, I wrote down sort of the list of where he went on conquest, but he went on conquest pretty much everywhere. I mean, it says Serbia, Moria, Trebizond, Wallachia, Bosnia, Venice, Moldavia, Albania, Crimea, and Italy. And so he basically goes around conquering everything. And during this time, after the taking of Constantinople, there's a flourishing of the arts, there's a flourishing of culture. And so Mehmed II is the first that is going into, oh my goodness, into S tier because he was just so great. I mean, you can't just like take over Constantinople and not get S tier for that. And yeah, there's not much, there's not much else to say about that. Mehmed the Third, on the other hand, probably doesn't live up to the name as much as the first two, and so he was sort of more like incompetent sort of sultan. He left the ruling of the empire to his mother, um, because so this is because he started ruling in a period where sort of the sultans became less hands-on and left the work to usually the their mothers who became sort of the actual sultans in terms of the day to day, even though the power was concentrated in the sultan's hands. And so what he did was he didn't really do that much. He tried forging relationships with England. um he he dealt with some revolts and things. There wasn't that much to his rule, and so Mehmed III goes probably in high bad tier. Because yeah, yeah, it's yeah. Um, right, Mehmed the Fourth. So let me see if we can. Let me see if we can find this. Oh, lovely. Oh, right. So Mehmed the Fourth. So what happened is Mehmed the Fourth oversaw the so he sort of oversaw this period of like revival. So he came after Ibrahim. So Ibrahim sort of messed a lot of things up because he was too busy, fornicating with women. And so Mehmed the Fourth comes up and he rules for the second longest period. So he rules for like I think like I don't know how long, like 30 years essentially. He rules for a very long time. And this period is marked, it's not like a crazy good period. This isn't, like a golden age. But it does usher in this thing called the Kupulu era where there are these viziers who are all from the Kupulu family sort of revive the empire's fortunes. They sort of focus on, the economics, to focus on making things good again. And so, and there's, some events like he regains land and yeah, so I don't know. I'd say Mehmed the Fourth probably. I think he goes in high good tier. That's what I'll put him for now. Although that might be unpopular, he might be in great tier, but That's what I'll where I'll put him for now. Right, Mehmed the Fifth. So Mehmed the Fifth. So this is starting to get into the sort of the late period, and you can tell because basically all the guys who come after Abdul Majid all wear fezzes, so that's how I tell which ones like come after. So Mehmed the Fifth is the second to last Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. He's the Sultan during the First World War, and obviously, the First World War did not go the best for the Ottoman Empire. And although it didn't even have that much to do with him, because at that point, the Sultan really didn't have that much power. Um, like things, were basically were being like ruled by everyone else. The Sultan is just a constitutional monarch. And so many of the things that happen, including, the loss of territory, some of the atrocities committed by the Ottoman Empire, were sort of out of his hands. Some of them particularly were even condemned, but Mehmed V at that point did not have any power to do anything. So, I mean, he's got to go in bad tier. Yeah, and finally, and Mehmed the Sixth is the last emperor, last not last emperor, last sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and you know, it ends with him, and obviously, you can't entirely blame him because when he ascended, World War One had already been lost, and so I mean, there's not much he could do. I mean, only the best thing that he did was that he dispatched Ataturk to reassert government control in Anatolia, which is probably the only redeeming quality about Mehmed, because he wasn't a strong sultan, but obviously at that point he didn't even really have an opportunity to show it off. So um, just for the Ataturk thing, I think it saves him from horrible tier, but he's going in bad tier. Yeah. And so the next one, Murad the First. And so luckily after we move on from these like sort of metal, we get to talk about a nice sultan. So Murad the First is one of the earliest sultans. He's the third one. He comes after Orhan, and uh, he's he what he does is he conquers a bunch of lands. So he expands to the Balkans. Um, like he forces these Balkan princes to pay him tribute, and he divides the empire into sort of Anatolia, like the Turkish part, and Rumelia, which is like the Balkan part. And so he just sort of just fought one land, did that, and yeah, it was one of and then he was eventually assassinated during battle, or at least that's what some sources say. But for that, Moran has got to go. He's got to go high. I'm going to put him in great tier. Yeah, he's an A tier. Lots of these early guys, yeah, lots of it is just going to be the early guys going in A tier, sort of the later guys going in sort of the not so good tiers. And so Murad the second is also one of the good sultans. He came in sort of the earlier period. He was sultan twice. I don't know if that gets him any points. Uh, And so what he did is he stabilized the empire and he prepared it for conquest for Mehmed II. So what he basically did is he like sort of he set up the alley-oop and then Mehmed II sort of like dunked it. That's essentially what happened because what he did was he tried to siege Constantinople I think multiple times. But despite doing that, but he was unsuccessful. You know, he went on campaigns against Venice, the Balkans. He defeated Timur's son, gaining revenge for Bayezid. And so, yeah, he was, and his domestic policies were good. He developed the economy, developed the cities, and so the Ottoman Empire flourished under Murad II, and only got better afterwards. So he was like a great launchpad, and so I mean, I don't know if he goes in S, but I'll put him in A tier, high A tier. So Murad the third, on the other hand, was I mean Murad the Third was still good. It's just hard to live up to, being Murad, the first and the second. His thing was he consolidated gains and he sort of went into Africa. That's like his thing. So the Ottoman Empire developed into the top of North Africa, and this was a lot of this was from Murad the Third, which where he brought in Morocco. He brought Ottoman supremacy to the Swahili coast, in places like Mogadishu, Barawa, Mombasa, and you know, I mean, he was also a patron of the arts. You know, one of the criticisms is he didn't really go on campaigns. He wasn't really sort of a warrior sultan. But even then, I think his and his authority was also not that strong because the harem had a strong influence on him. But even then, his rule was marked by prosperity, and so I think I've got a. I mean, I think I'll put him in. I'll put him in A tier. I'll put him in great tier. He's a good ruler. Being named Murad, I think, is a good sign. An Ottoman ruler. And so Murad the Fourth. So yeah, moving on to Murad the Fourth. So Murad the Fourth is uh, also pretty uh, decent ruler. He restores the authority of the state after previously, like the sultans that came before him, Mustafa and Usman the Second, had both sort of reigned over these unsteady periods, and they were both like really threatened by the Janissaries, who had gained tons and tons of power. And so basically, what Murad the Fourth was he was just brutal. Murad the Fourth, he basically just killed everyone for like no reason. He just like executed people just for like he wasn't necessarily like he didn't he's very repressive. He didn't necessarily do that much good things, but he also didn't do that much like bad other than being oppressive, which at that point may have been seen as sort of a necessary evil. So I would say Murad Fourth probably goes. I mean, putting him in, yeah, I don't know about good tier, but I think I'll put him in. He goes in all right tier. Yeah. And so Murad the Fifth, well, Murad the Fifth is he rules for like no time. He rules, I think it's for like 90 days. He's sort of like a kind of irrelevant. I don't know if that's the right word. Um, like Sultan, he was weak and he was quickly deposed. So I don't even think he's like barely even worth. I mean, I never want to put him in F, but like he really didn't do anything. So in that respect, I think I'm gonna put him in F just because like he didn't do anything. He's just kind of weak and just like like at least have a personality like Ibrahim. Like at least be interesting. And so Mustafa the First, is also not a very good sultan. He sort of is plagued by mental illness. He's emperor. Sorry, not emperor. He's sultan twice, and basically he doesn't really do anything, and his mum rules for him. And so what he did was like he he didn't really do anything. He just sort of like Osman came the second came after him, and what he did is he basically just like teamed up with Janissaries to like kill him. That's like the only thing he did. So Mustafa's just not good. He's going in F tier. Like he's just not. And Mustafa the second was all right. So in comparison, so what he did is he commanded armies against Siberia, it's not Siberia, Serbia, and recaptured Chios from the Russians. He also like tried to increase the power of Sultanate with like Timur by creating this like sort of alternative cavalry. Although it didn't really work that well because at that point, like the Janissaries held so much power, and he was eventually deposed. And so Mustafa the second, he, I mean, I think I'll put him in all right tier because he tried doing something, like to change sort of the woes of his predecessors. So yeah, that's yeah, and right. And so moving on, Mustafa the Third. So Mustafa the Third was a one of the bad sultans. So his rule brought about losses of a bunch of territory. He tried to get with good with Russia, but fighting with Russia led to like horrible disaster. He tried to he cared about the prosperity of his empire. So what he did is he tried regulating coinage, built grain stores, maintained aqueducts, and went underwent reconstruction policies. But the territory losses were just they were big, and so I think he's got to go in put him in detail. I mean, he wasn't I mean he tried, but it's just like high yeah. Anyways, right. Mustafa the Fourth, again, look, Mustafa is like the opposite of Murad. Being named Mustafa as a sultan is just not a very good thing. And so what he did was, he basically he came after Salim the Third. He sort of signed a truce with the Russians, and he didn't really like do that much. He basically sort of just overthrew Salim the Third, and sort of just didn't do that much after. And so, like, what his biggest thing was he just sort of led the way for Mahmud the Second to come to power. And so, yeah, he wasn't very good. He's going in detail. Yeah, maybe like yeah. So afterwards, Orhan is one of the good ones. He's the second sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and he basically what he did was he built the Janissaries. Obviously, looking back in hindsight, the Janissaries hold too much power, blah 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 blah. But at the time, this was like for starting off an empire starting out. This is incredible military reform. What he does is he conquers northwestern Anatolia. He makes great land gains, great just great gains in general, and he sort of takes advantage of the fact that the Byzantines are in decline. And yeah, so Orhan goes into the A tier because you're probably one of the better one of the best sultans. Usman first, there's not that much to say, to be honest, because he starts the Ottoman Empire. He has his Beylik. He goes out, conquers, 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 and he starts off, sort of the rest of all this. And so that's probably the easiest like S tier because he's the first. He's a great warrior. All the sultans afterwards have to be crowned, well, not crowned, but like sort of uh officiated like in their rule with the sword of Usman. And so yeah, it's an easy S tier. Um, Usman the second, however, is sort of not as good. He has this, like this beef with Mustafa, because he comes to power in a coup, opposing Mustafa the first. He tries to have peace with Persia. Tries to go against Poland, but he fails. And like the Janissaries had a bunch of power, and eventually they're overthrown. So Usman is not good. I think. I mean, he's got to be put in there. If he's horror, not he's not a good. I mean, it's a real contrast for between Usman the first and Usman the second, but that's just how it is. And so, yeah. So, but moving on to Usman the third, is he is also not that good. Not as good as he's one of those sultans that's kept in the cafes for an excessively long period of time. He stays there for 51 years, basically, more than his entire adult life. He lives there basically until, being an old, like not an old man, but like past basically the entirety of his life. And so you know, he didn't really do that much. He sort of focused on sort of putting down, banditry and rebellion in the empire. He sort of tries to diminish the power of the viziers, but isn't that successful. And so, and I mean, it's like I looked at the Wikipedia page, and it basically just said he didn't like music. That was sort of his thing. You know, he didn't really do that much. I don't know if he's as bad as Usman the second because he didn't really at least do that much bad. Like, so he just goes in like, I mean, he goes in all right tier because you know like he didn't really do that much, he didn't really do that much bad. So yeah, and you know he already came out. He did an imprisonment for 50 years. Like you know the guy give the guy a break. So yeah, right. And then moving on to Salim the First, who is one of the you know I would say probably that's a easy S tier because what he does is he basically like you know guys like Orhan, Bayezid, Murad sort of make these territorial gains, but Salim makes these huge territorial gains. Because he conquers basically sort of he conquers the Middle East. Well, not the entirety of the Middle East. He conquers um sort of that like Arabian Peninsula sort of, and he basically he expands the Ottoman Empire by an incredible degree. You know, he's a great warrior, incredibly violent. But again, what he did was he secured sort of the routes to Mecca and Medina, and he pivoted the empire towards sort of a more like Arab kind of Islamic kind of thing rather than the sort of more Turkic central, you know, Turkic kind of like yeah. And so yeah, Salim, he's probably one of the biggest contributors to the prosperity of the Ottoman Empire, so he goes into S tier. And then Selim the Second. So Selim the Second was the son of Suleiman the Magnificent, and he was not nowhere near as good as his father or his grandfather. Basically, what happened during his rule was that he sort of like gave up all his power. He basically just like let his vizier control everything. So he didn't really do that much. He was, you know, he was a drunk, and he sort of like you know there were gains that were made during his rule, but they were you know they weren't that big, and it was just and you know he was sort of a especially compared to you know what came before. He was sort of a really kind of like pathetic ruler, and so I think I'd put him in B tier because he just like you know maybe it's the things next to him, but he wasn't that good. So Salim the Third is so Salim the Third was you know was comparatively better. And so what he did was he tried to modernize you know the army by like getting foreign instructors to sort of teach and train this professional army who would be comprised of like I think it was like sort of like peasants and stuff. And they'd sort of form this professional army. They would provide sort of like another force apart from just the Janissaries who had too much power. And he tried to reimpose power over the Balkans. However, he was eventually overthrown because you know the Janissaries had too much power, and he posed a threat to the rule. So you know he was deposed. I would say he goes certainly. I think he would say he goes in good tier. Yeah. And so move on to Suleiman the First, and there's not much to say. It's an easy top tier. Um, you know, during the rule of Suleiman, the Ottoman Empire reached its greatest peak, is at its strongest. You know, culture and art flourishes, the economy flourishes, the cities all, you know, everything is great. Like Suleiman sort of marks the turning point of as he's like the peak of the mountain, and then afterwards everything else is downhill from there. And so yeah, it's like yeah, he's the greatest. So you know, he's not called the Magnificent for no reason. And he's also, you know, incredible, great writer, and just like, yeah, it was, yeah, like, just, yeah, like conquest and yeah. And so Suleiman the Second, which, let me see if I can find. Suleiman the Second is, you know, is not as good as the first Suleiman. I mean, he reconquers Belgrade in war against the Holy League, but and but you know, there's not that much. He's you know, he has military victory. He's got military defeat. Um, he's probably one of the better sort of like he's one of the better sultans that kind of spends their whole life in the cafes. And so Suleiman II, I think, would probably go in B tier. But yeah, that's my list for this. Yeah, and so hopefully, and then yeah. So I hope you enjoyed it. Uh, Please don't get mad at what I picked. It's just my opinion, okay, guys? Like, uh don't come out here attacking me, but please leave what you think in the comments below. If you even made it this far, I'd be surprised. Because this is sort of turned into a rant video, but you know, that's that. And so yeah, hopefully I'll have yeah, I'll have like a you know like a bab um Habab thing at the end of this. I don't know. But yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe. Yeah, this is the ranking.